Hi, hope everybody is doing well. First, a big thank you for all the continued support. You guys make producing videos fun. If you are new here, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help the channel. Today, Analogue Productions, specifically the 50 releases of their RCA Living Stereo Reissue series. I'm choosing my top 10 for listening for enjoyment, for use in score study for conducting, and for reviewing purposes for Audiophilia. I touched on this last week in my previous video. I'll link it below. So these records have a lot to give a musician, listener, and writer. Even though primarily a reissue company of all genres of music, Analogue Productions has become iconic, synonymous with the very best in remastering great records by master recutting engineers from the original analog tapes. Absolutely no digital corruption, and they sound it. I've not heard many or any weak releases because of the remastering. A couple maybe because of a weaker original tape. They don't last forever. Chad Casson, the owner, has been like a vinyl father figure to collectors and music lovers, for which we should be ever grateful. But there was one man equally important to the audiophile vinyl community as Chad, and that was Michael Hobson of Classic Records. Michael founded it in 1993 with $200,000 of his own money, and he released 20 classic RCA titles. I bought them all and loved them. Most were remastered by Bernie Grunman. Now, when Chad bought Classic Records, he bought the catalog, the metalwork, the lot. But even though the classic reissues were legendary, at least to me, Chad went another step and had them remastered by Ryan K. Smith of Sterling Sound. They have become benchmark for classical reissues. And as we go through my 10 choices, I'll fill in any blanks. I'd like to tell you a reissues versus original story. My history with classic reissues goes back to 1993, where I wrote a series of 5 posts each reviewing 4 classic reissues. Most were full of bouquets with very few brickbats. Another Toronto reviewer, this is almost 30 years ago when I started Audiophilia, and who much later became a very, very good friend, he has sadly since passed, had the most enviable original vinyl collection with 3 of everything, EMI, Decca, RCA, and Mercury ever released. 1 play copy, 1 backup copy, and 1 sealed. Yeah, he was one of those guys. A superb collection in his music room in his gorgeous Hogs Hollow townhome. Jealous much? Anyway, we were invited over to his house to listen. And the system was wonderful. Alon speakers, VPI, the big massive VPI turntable. It was wonderful. We had a lovely time. Later on, when I wrote those articles about the originals, the reissues and how much I enjoyed them, I got a phone call. And the phone call went on for about half an hour of this gentleman, who later became my very close friend, basically yelling at me, telling me how could I like the reissues better than the originals. Well, that's an age-old discussion going on. I love both. So the reissues, as we've gone on with, especially with Ryan K. Smith, have improved and improved. And some of the ones that Bernie is doing now, and Kevin Gray, and of course Ryan, are using much updated equipment from the stuff they used 30 years ago. So along with that story, I want to cast a vote in favor for Classic Records RCA reissues. Lots of opinions about them being cut hot, bright, whatever you want to call it. It's system dependent for sure, but they sounded great on mine over the years. I will say the Dvorak's Slavonic Dances was too bright on every system, and Reiner's Strauss Waltzes I much prefer the original. Still a pretty enviable track record. Before we get to my top 10, I'd like to mention another channel that I really enjoy that you should all visit if you're interested in further videos about the golden age of recording. It's called The Pressing Matters. I'll link it below. Scott has the most enviable collection and brings great knowledge and style to his videos. I've learned a lot. I think you will too, and you'll enjoy them. Before we get to the fun part, I should mention a little bit about Audiophilia, which is my main job. Audiophilia.com is a magazine that's been online for almost 30 years. We get about 1 million uniques a year and 7 million page views, so quite a few people are reading. We hope you go and read the reviews. Many of the records we talk about are on our Audiophilia Dream List. I just did a video about that. I'll link that below. We've got 2 reviews coming up that I think you'll be interested in. One is of a tone arm. It is the Origin Live Enterprise Mark IV tone arm. It's absolutely stunning. I'll give away the review. It's a wonderful tone arm, but I think you should read it anyway. And that's coming up next month. And also later on in, I think it's early November, is the DeGritter Mark II ultrasonic record cleaner. Now the DeGritter Mark I took the vinyl community by storm. It's very expensive, no doubt about it. But I'm looking forward to publishing the review. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you're in the market for a new cleaner, and aren't we all with our vinyl curated expensive collection, you should check out the DeGritter Mark II. So let's get to the fun part. These are my 10. These are in no particular order. What I'll probably do is put up a slide with each one just to give you all the pertinent information, because for sure, I'm getting old, I'll forget something. So this is also Sprague Zarathustra LSC 1806. A wonderful remake. And again, I'm listening for the definition at the very beginning. One of the problems with this piece on record is it starts off with a low C on the double basses before the trumpets come in with what's called the World Riddle theme, and very famous Sunrise by Richard Strauss, used in 2001. But the basses are tremolando, and a lot of times the definition is not good enough, and all you get is that kind of low drone with the basses. But it's actually, they're not détaché, but they're definitely tremolando, and you should be able to hear that. And on this recording, of course, you do. There's the man himself, it's Rhino. You're going to see him a lot today. Of course, living stereo. You've got to get the violin tone right if you're listening. And I use this one because, of course, it's got Heifetz. And Heifetz went and ruined the Brahms violin concerto for everybody else that followed, because his performance is so magnificent. The second and third movements are fantastic, and the orchestra sounds amazing. But my goodness, his playing of the first movement. Listen very carefully, if you have this record, to the end of the when he finishes his cadenza, and he kind of keeps going up and up, like he's going to heaven, and his violin playing is just unbelievable. The tone on this record is very, very beautiful. I'm also listening for the intonation of the woodwinds. I have conducted this a couple of times, and the intonation of the woodwinds in Brahms is very difficult. It's much easier to conduct than to play. Playing is, it looks easy on the page, but it's not. It's very, very challenging. And so that's what I'm listening for. And of course, the Chicago Symphony are pretty well flawless under Reiner. So this is a great one. This is LSC 1903. Again, these are by Ryan K. Smith. These are the later ones, the analog production ones, not the classic records ones. I do have one or two classic records, and I'll mention them because I haven't got around to replacing them yet. One of the things I do, I always look for, I'm not a collector, I want to get the best performance and sound possible and interpretation. And Bolero, yeah, we've played it lots of times, connected it, but Ravel didn't like the piece, he thought it was his worst piece ever. It's got to be done very well. Munch does a beautiful job here with the Boston Symphony, but it's the other repertoire on here that's just superb. Let's see what we got here. We have one of the greatest performances of Laval's you'll ever hear. Laval's is very tricky to bring off 3/4, but you conduct it in 1. There's a lot of rubato. That means robbing time. It's very challenging, and it has to be a big crescendo as it gets more exciting and the waltz kind of goes insane. It's amazing. Rhapsody Espagnole, not quite as good as the one coming up on the Rhino Sound, which I'll talk to you about. And of course, we have Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faune, with the great flute solo played by Dorio Anthony Dwyer, the principal flute of the orchestra for many years. It's magnificent. So I got this for, the sound is wonderful, but again for the repertoire. You're not going to hear a bit of Laval's. It's even better than the Paul Paray classic reissues Mercury with the Detroit Symphony, which is very, very good. This is amazing. This is LSC 1984. This is an obvious choice. Mine was so wrecked, my classic records version was so wrecked that I had to get a new version, and this is the Ryan K. Smith version. It's just wonderful. It's very smooth. The mid-range is gorgeous. It's dynamic. The opening, I listened carefully for the bass. Does it have that kind of reverberant bass in the opening of the Gounod with the percussion? And then, of course, Carmen is very, very, very wonderful. I had a lot of connection with this record. My flute teacher at Trinity College of Music in London, Harold Clark, was principal flute of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden during this whole living stereo era. And there I was asking about tonguing and breathing and phrasing. And what I should have been talking to him about was playing at Kingsway on all these recordings. Anyway, a magnificent teacher and a magnificent flute player. And the whole orchestra is very good. This is conducted by Alexander Gibson, Sir Alexander Gibson, better known as Sandy Gibson. Just, it's a wonderful record. Everyone has that, I would think. That's a no-brainer. That's LSC, the very famous LSC 2449. I just did a shootout of this one with the Beecham on EMI. I'm just going to leave this one. It's Ryan K. Smith's version. I would say it's better than the earlier classics records. He managed to control some of the congested mid-range on this record, but it sounds very beautiful. And of course, the last movement everybody goes to, the one take last movement. Furious tempo, very loud at the end, and the recording manages everything. It's just tremendous. It's LSC 2446. Witch's Brew. I just got a phone call from my nephew Ian, who's in Los Angeles, and he went to, I think it's called High Fidelity, and the guys used to work at Classic Records. And they have a whole bunch of Classic Records sealed, which I purchased a couple. And Ian was looking for Witch's Brew, but they wanted $150, which is not a bad thing for the classic Witch's Brew, which this is. And I'll put up the slide and see who did all the remastering. This really has got lambasted on Steve Hoffman's forums, mainly by Steve, saying basically it's like an ice pick on the record player. And, I think that's a little hyperbole. I think it's very good. Again, it's system dependent. It's an incredible recording. The repertoire is kind of interesting. Let's see what we got here. It's got Malcolm Arnold Tam O'Shanter, which is a fun piece. I've played it a couple of times. The Nomas section from Pictures, and we've got another Pictures coming up, so I won't discuss that. Nine on Bear Mountain. Notice that I'm not using the power of the orchestra. Another fantastic Shaded Dog living stereo RCA, because of the Nine on Bear Mountain, which is an arrangement by Rene Leibowitz, normally a wonderful musician, but the arrangement is so hideous, I can't even listen to it. It's a bit of a joke, actually. And then it's got Danse Macabre, Witch's Ride, and Mephisto Waltz. It's good repertoire, but it's so beautifully played by the New Symphony Orchestra of London, basically the LSO, under the guise of an RCA contract, recorded in England. So I'll put the slide up and tell you who did this. I like it. It's Classic Records. I have not heard the Analogue Productions one. I'm sure it's wonderful, but I think it's out of print and it's always sold out. And I think Ryan did a bang-up job. But this is very good. If you can't get the Ryan K. Smith, you can get this one. On that same phone call from Ian, he was telling me, doesn't call me uncle. He calls me Anthony. Anthony, is this a good one? And I told him it's one of the top 3 or 4. This is Debussy Iberia. Isn't it amazing that French composers wrote the best Spanish music? Now, I'm going to be doing a shootout of the Defia Three-Cornered Hat. And that is the greatest orchestral piece written by a Spaniard. But Debussy and Ravel wrote so much music influenced by the Basque region in the south of France. And it's fantastic. And you can see the costumes. This is with the Chicago Symphony and Rhino. Let's see what's on it. This has some pretty spectacular repertoire. Debussy Iberia, which is absolutely stunning, fantastic, and is played beautifully. I'm looking for the balance of the orchestra. Of course, Rhino balances it perfectly. They have no choice but to play it perfectly with him conducting. Vols Noble et Sentimental by Ravel. It's deceptively easy, but it's not easy. It's an arrangement of a piano piece by Ravel, and also the same for Alborado del Gracioso, which has triple tonguing to die for. If you listen carefully on the French horn, but it's the flute triple tonguing in the low register that I'm practicing for all the time. It's on every audition. And this is amazing. Donald Peck was the principal flute. He's unbelievable. And he was a principal flute for almost 45 years. And this is LSC 2222. And it's magnificent. Everybody should have that. And mine was so worn out that my classics, that I got the Ryan K. Smith one. It's fantastic. This is my pictures and exhibition. I've spoken about this lots of times on this channel. This is Mussorgsky Ravel's arrangement, Fritz Ryan, the Chicago Symphony. So when I'm listening to this, I've told you this before, there's a little part in Nomas, the famous one that's been redone on Power of the Orchestra and also on the on Witch's Brew. The very beginning of Nomas is a bass drum and cymbal whack, the back left of Chicago Orchestra Hall. They're slightly separated. Do I hear that separation? And also, in the aftermath of the whack, there's a horn, kind of like a phrase, very just sustained, and it's muted horns, and the second horn screws it up, for want of a better word, or wobbles. And I doubt that Rhino ever heard it, and even on the recording, but of course we hear everything. But it's really good to test your stereo that way, and I do that a lot. So that's Living Stereo LSE 2201. It's a famous performance. Not only is it the best played, it's the best sounding, and of course Rhino's interpretation is outstanding. I've saved my two favorites to last. The first one is the Rhino Sound. This is the Ryan K. Smith reissue. Be careful if you're a jacket person. The Rhino came as a matte finish. Everything else came as a glossy finish. Some people aren't happy about that. I don't blame them. The reason it's shiny is because I have Vinyl Storage Solutions dual flap cover. By the way, these sleeves, they're just amazing. I use the MoFi inner sleeve, but it's just beautiful. You can just slide it in there. Everything's protected, no dust. But the outside is like, it's just perfectly cut. I decided to re-sleeve after my friend at the Pressing Matters re-sleeved his collection as well. So I just did like, what was it Stravinsky said? Good composers borrow, great composers steal. So I've stolen lots of Scott's ideas because his site, The Pressing Matters, is so good. Anyway, the Rhino Sound. Two pieces, or three pieces, I think. It has also the Pavane for Dead Princess by Ravel. It's got the best recording ever of Rhapsody Espagnole. More Spanish music written by a Frenchman. It's just magnificent. How he gets that incredibly diaphanous, sexy sound from the violins and strings when he was such an old grump. And then it's got Isle of the Dead. And Isle of the Dead by Rachmaninoff is a fantastic piece. It's great to study the conducting. It's in 5/8 time, and you have to sometimes subdivide in 3/2 and sometimes 2/3. And it just builds and builds. And as a conductor, you've got to keep the 5/8 flowing, and you've got to build it to these 2 or 3 climaxes. And of course, Rhino does it superbly. If you watch on YouTube, Rhino has a massive stick and a very, very tiny beat like that. He had no sense of humor. One time, the principal bass of one of the provincial orchestras he was conducting, I think it was Pittsburgh, took out a telescope because he couldn't see Rhino's beat. Rhino fired him and had him blackballed from the industry. Rhino didn't have a sense of humor. He wouldn't do well in the 21st century. Anyway, it is magnificent. The performance is fantastic. I listen out very carefully, and I'll put it up on the screen. For a little tiny violin or viola, I think it's violin part that's muted, and it's just a little figure going up. But it's such a gorgeous muted string sound, and this recording captures it perfectly, as well as all the massive explosions, the flute solo, Donald Peck again, floating over the top of the orchestra. So one of the most important pieces we play because there's lots of flute solos in it, playing the part of the Nightingale. And it starts off like a scalded cat. It's an incredibly challenging piece. Rhythmically, it's very challenging. I practice it for the conducting as well, but mainly I just, listening carefully, obviously for enjoyment, but listening carefully to how the flute player, Donald Peck again, playing it, and it's just superb. As a reviewer, The first 2 minutes of Kijé gave me everything I ever need for just about anything. It's just, I'll tell you a quick story about this. I've had some conversations on Facebook about what reviewers use. And I know I've got into prog rock, and I promise you I'm going to be doing a prog rock video coming up very soon. I've kind of been heavy in the classical for the last 3 or 4 videos. Anyway, my friend Gabriella was here, and she's a great musician, got incredible ears. And I put on jazz samba, you know, I had a Japanese pressing with Stan Getz, and she was hearing my stereo for the first time, including my beloved speakers from Michael Barson. And the system, I won't kid you, it's very expensive. It's probably about a $250,000 system sitting there. And we put on the jazz samba, Stan Getz, who she just adores. And she's listening, and she's got great ears, and she's very honest to a fault. She said, you know, Anthony, I'm not that impressed. And I thought, well, okay, I think I got why. So I said, okay, let me put something else on for you. So I put on the first 2 minutes of Kijé. After the first minute or two, she looked down and she went, wow, now I get it. And what she was getting as a musician is all the cues that the solo trumpet in the hall, the snare drum, the piccolo, the bass drum, and the French horn section are doing. And they're doing a lot of it piano or pianissimo. But it gives you so many cues, so many tells on how a system is working. And then it gets very, very loud. So it transitions from very quiet to very loud. And how does your system handle it? So I'm listening for this for all 3 things: for great enjoyment, for conducting, Prokofiev, and the Stravinsky especially. It's much more difficult to conduct. But the flute playing, of course, for the Stravinsky. But also as a reviewer, it's just the ultimate review record, LSC 2150. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. It's my 10 Analogue Productions reissues of the classic record series. Long may it continue. I think many of them are still in print. Quite a few are still for sale at the Acoustic Sound site. I have no financial consideration. Chad doesn't know me from a hole in the head, but you can get them. I think they're about $40 each.